Hello all, welcome to Technology Training Experts. We are here with a new video on Tosca interview questions and answers part 4. If you have not watched our previous videos part 1, 2 and 3, we have added those links in the description. Please go through it before going through this part 4. Now we have got so many requests to our mailer and also some requests in the comments asking us to do questions and answers related to Tosca scenarios because interviewers are asking about the Tosca scenarios and people wanted to do how it looks like. So here we are. So in the previous videos, we have seen what are the different types of questions on concepts and a framework and also linking of these two things in order to check your capacity to think and also to check if you have really worked in Tosca projects or not. Now these questions, whatever we are going to see in this video, we have designed in such a way that we wanted to check if you have not just only worked on it but also have solved the problems that you generally face in projects. Now let us see this. These are very interesting, not just only for your interview questions but also for your project working scenarios to solve your daily problems. Having said that, let us go through it. So here's the question 1. Question 1. Every time a test case fails, we want to take the screenshot of the application. How do we achieve this? So generally, why do we ask this question is like we are combining two different scenarios into this. We individually know how to take a screenshot, and also we know when exactly. If you want to take a screenshot, you put that TBox screenshot module in that particular location. But now it's not only about directly using your screenshot. Every time a test case fails, you want to take a screenshot. How do we achieve this? So the answer will be like, first of all, how do we take a screenshot? TBox take screenshot option. This helps us take the screenshot. This is the standard. This is present in the standard modules. This will be helping where this module will have the location, the directory, and also file name. You can fill all these details. Wherever you put this TBox take screenshot, it will take the screenshot. But you can't guess where exactly the test case fails, right? That is the problem here. If you want to take a simple screenshot, you put this module, you will take a screenshot. But where exactly the test case fails? Now that is a different concept. Now, how do you actually understand when a test case fails? You can take the control using cleanup scenario. We set up a cleanup scenario, and that is where we get a grip of the grip of the test case where exactly you are failing, where exactly the test case is failing. Now let us combine these two things. So we can add the tbox stay screenshot into your cleanup scenario so that whenever you are executing a test case and if it is failing because of any of the reasons, dialog failure, exception failure, or even verification failure, the control should come to the cleanup scenario before executing the next test case. Now in the cleanup scenario, before even doing some things, whatever is the cleanup, generally the cleanup scenario will have close browser or close application or close the server. So generally closing all the things so that the next test case will work fine. But here, before doing all that, we will be executing the tbox stay screenshot. So every time an exception or a dialog failure or a verification failure occurs, you can ask the tool to take a screenshot and then apply the cleanup scenarios. Now combining these two scenarios, we can achieve this. Now as I have explained, let me show you a screenshot of how it looks like. You see this? In the recovery scenario, we have added a cleanup scenario, and inside this cleanup scenario, the first part is take a screenshot. I'm asking it to take a screenshot and save it in that particular directory with a file name. In the file name, we don't have to give it as .png. It will be saved automatically as JPG format. And then the cleanup scenario will be coming into the picture. Now our application is a demo web shop application. So we are asking Whenever a test case fails, take a screenshot and come down and then close all the browsers starting with the demo star. So it will close all the browsers and then the execution will go to the next test case. So if the test case is pass, the screenshot won't come into the picture. Only if the test case is fail, that screenshot will come into the picture. This is one of the best usage in our projects. Now going to the question number 2. If an order has been created successfully and the successful message is order placed. Order ID is some number. Here it is 766592 example. Now, how do we separate this order ID alone? I just want only that 766592 alone. I don't want the complete text here. How do we do that? So this is the question. Now, the answer for this would be, firstly, you have to understand, you have as an answer, right? Just ask more questions related to this, or you yourself you give some considerations. How do we answer this? So, firstly, we have to understand if the above text is a complete one single object or is it separate object. So if it is separate object, I have to create a module for an object for order placed separately and order ID separately. So order ID will be order ID colon 766592 will be taken into consideration. So identify what is the object that you have. Sometimes your developer might have created order ID column separately and that value separately. There can be chances where your developer can divide it and create the objects separately. If the objects are created separately, this is a very simple, straightforward answer. That is like we can simply apply the buffer. We can capture that object, and in the test case, we can simply say, okay, for this object, use a buffer, get the inner text of that object, and save it in your buffer. So that will save your value. Very straightforward, very nice. But the problem occurs most of the cases the developer will define complete text as one single object. So order placed dot order ID colon 766592 is one single object. The problem comes if it is one single object. Now if it is one single object, what do we do? Definitely have to create a module to identify this object. Okay. Once I identify this object and when I go to test case, we use we have two methods practically to achieve this, but first method is the best method. So as I told you just now, we identify this object which is complete object and go to the modules and create the module. Now drag this module, drop it on this test case. So in the test case, what do I do is we say verify, action mode is verify, and I say verify if the inner text of this inner text or outer text, whichever field it is, inner text of this object is order placed dot order ID colon. This number is changeable, right? So as of now, the current order is 766592. Maybe the next order would be 766593, 766594. So this number will change. So I can apply one method here called XBuffer. So I can tell the tool, you verify this complete text, it should have order placed dot order ID colon, but this value will change. How do you tell the tool? Using XBuffer. Now here is the sample example for you to see this. XBuffer option, using the XBuffer option along with the verify action mode. So here is an example. You see this? I'm saying get this object and then drag and drop into the test case. Inner text is equal to, I'm saying order placed dot order ID colon. So till here you are asking it to verify. It will verify. But then you are asking the tool, after this colon, whatever comes, you are saying you dynamically buffer this value, X buffer this value and store it with the name called order ID value underscore B. So this line will do two things. It will verify the first text and then it will buffer whatever value that is coming here. It will do both values. So now order value will, once the execution is complete, this order ID value will be stored inside your test case. This is one value. This is the best method. There is one more method. Okay, so when you're answering the interviews, right, don't stick to one answer because there are different methods. The more and more different ways of giving an answer, the interviewer will be very happy and will give an impression that you have worked hands-on more. You have handled more scenarios. You know how to solve a problem. not just one way, multiple ways. Now, using that, the next option is using partial buffer. We can trim this value. So apply partial buffer to trim the order value. So exactly same option. You can identify a module, go to the test case, and then get all of these things and save it in a buffer. Now, once you save it in a buffer, what do we do is we can send it to partial buffer and ask it to cut short whatever the value that you want. You can trim. You can tell that, okay, I don't want all of these things. You start from here, you end it here, and you trim this value. This value is more than enough for me. So now, example, you see this partial buffer? I'm giving this value as an input here. You can give directly, or you can get this value, store it in a buffer, and you can use that buffer value as an input here, flower bracket b of that text, whatever text it is, you can give it. So what are you saying here? You're telling the partial buffer to start the trimming from 24 and end the trimming on 29. So this is 24th line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So till 23 letters you don't want it. You want it only from 24th column. So 24 to 29 you want. And you cut it and you store it in a new buffer name called order ID value underscore B. This is also one method where you can get the order ID value. But it is a bigger procedure, but there will be some complications here. Example, if there is any new text or different text that is coming here, or order ID number can be maybe more than 6 digits, sometimes 6 digits, sometimes seven digits. All those confusions will have problems here. This is a static way, this is a dynamic way. That's the reason the first option is the best option. Okay, so that's with the question number 2. Now moving to the question number 3. Question number 3. Is it possible to read data from an Excel sheet and write it into another sheet of an Excel workbook in a single test case? So in a single test case, consider you have a workbook. Okay, example, employee details workbook. Inside that workbook, you have one sheet and you have another sheet. You have two sheets. So is it possible to read data? I mean, it is definitely possible to read the data from a single sheet and write it back to the same sheet. It is definitely possible. It's a direct procedure. We use TBox open Excel workbook and then define the range and then Excel range manipulation, and finally you close the sheet. It's all about one single range. But how do we do this for multiple sheets in a single test case? I'm not talking about two separate test cases, single test case. How do we do? First of all, is it possible? The answer is yes, it is possible. So what do we do here is, as I've told you just now, we can open this Excel workbook and define the workbook name as employee details, as I told you. So the whole concentration here, how do we handle this situation is, we can add two different ranges. So the sheet, the employee details is one single workbook. Now inside this workbook, after opening this Excel workbook, the next step is define Excel range. Now define two separate Excel ranges. Example, you see different the ranges for the first sheet and second sheet separately for the same workbook. Example, you see this employee details. I have the sheet name as personal info and I'm defining a range R1 as A1 to H15. So R1 is my range for this sheet, personal info sheet. Now let's go to the second sheet of under the same Excel workbook. We go to the second sheet. Now you see under the same employee details, I'm going to the second sheet called salary data and the range name as R2. This range can be different here and here, that doesn't matter, but R1 and R2. R1 is for personal info and R2 is for salary data for the same workbook. So I have got R1 and I have got R2. So now this R1 and R2 we can apply it as in our next steps. The next step is range manipulation. Now range manipulation is very simple. So you can open R1, you can use R1 in the range manipulate Excel range, right? Excel range manipulation. Um, the latest version of for Tosca has manipulate Excel range. These matters. These small things matter. You have to specify exact names. If you are specifying the old names, the interviewer will definitely understand that okay, maybe you're not up to the mark with the latest versions. So the point here is you can use R1 in the Excel range manipulation or manipulate Excel range, and you can read the data, store it some buffer. Now you can go to R2, same Excel manipulate Excel range, you repeat for one more time for R2 and you write the data into that using the buffers, and finally save the workspace. So you can read and write accordingly. So the key is all about the range here. So the same question can be asked in a different way. Can I create multiple ranges for a single test for a single Excel sheet in a test case? Of course, yes. Okay. So that's with the question 3. Moving to the question 4. Question 4. What is the use of TBox start program standard module? List down at least 2 examples of its usage. Now, TBox start program, this is very less used among the people who are freshers. I mean, who don't have too much of exposure on the Tosca, right? They use it very less. But actually, this has lots of importance. It can do lots of great things we never use directly in our projects. But to understand your knowledge on standard modules, people will definitely ask this question, TBox start program. Now, to answer this, it helps us launch or close any new application, particularly non-UI application. If you have command prompt or any of the non-UI application, if you take command prompt, it does not have any UI. You can't scan it with our normal module scan. No, it requires a separate scanning called Vision AI. So that's a separate licensing inside Tosca. You explain all these details in the interview. So if we don't have Tosca Vision AI license, then we have to go for Tosca launch. I mean, for those applications, we use TBox start program. So example, now you see this, this is how we use the TBox start program. We give the path here, what exactly we want to open it. This is the command prompt. Simply, it will go to the path and it will kickstart that particular program to open this. Once it is open, either you can use Vision AI to scan that command prompt and execute it, or you can use tbox send keys to send some data into this or some commands into the command prompt. Okay, so tbox start program helps us to launch or close new application. Now one more thing, one more example is there. So helps handle browser options. Now this is really interesting option. The reason why I say it is interesting option is that you require this a lot inside your projects, but we mostly use close browser. Close browser either closes only the current tab or all the tabs or all the browser. But if you want to close a specific browser or you want to kill the instance or open something in the incognito mode, this will be really helpful. So for killing an instance of the browser, how do we do that is this. See, we use the path and we say it as task kill. This is the operation, and what is the arguments here? /f/im and chrome.exe. Now there are so many different rules and commands that we have inside this. If you want to explore, please go through this tbox start program and see the examples of it. You will understand much. So here with this example, we can simply close the Chrome browser. We can kill the instance of the Chrome browser. Very interesting option. If you want to open any of the web Windows based applications also, you can use tbox start program. Okay, you can actually open browser also using this, but we have better way of opening the browser like open URL, but it can be done using tbox start program. So that's with this question 4. Now moving to the question number 5. Question number 5. How do we delete a particular cell value? A particular cell value like fourth row, location column value is location, the fourth row and the column is location. We may have multiple other columns like first name, last name, address, but I want to delete something from the location. How do we do that? Fourth row location from the Excel sheet in Tosca test case. See, most of the examples that you see in the anywhere in whatever we use is either we want to read it or we want to write it into the Excel sheet. But this is a small change. I want to delete a particular cell. How do we delete it? The moment you see a delete, you will get an idea in your head that, okay, I will send a function key called flower bracket del. Now, actually, that won't work in your Excel sheet. That will work as an instruction or an action onto a web page on a particular place to delete something. But here in an Excel sheet, it won't work. So how do we handle it? How do we delete a particular cell value? It's a very simple, it's very small technique. So the answer this would be, firstly, we must navigate to the fourth row and column location. How do we do that? We open the Excel workbook, we define the range, and in the Excel range manipulation, I can specifically say go to the fourth row, go to that range, open that range, and inside that go to the fourth row and the column location I can select. But from there, I can pass an empty cell. Just pass an empty cell without action with action mode input. So you are writing an empty value into the Excel sheet. That's the simple logic here. Observe this. After opening the after opening the Excel workbook, after defining the range, we come to the Excel range manipulation. Now here, what we do use is Excel range. Range name is R1. I have defined it as R1. So I'm saying go to this R1 range, go to the fourth row, and go to this location column. Okay, it will go to the fourth row and location column, but I'm inputting an empty field here. Don't input anything. Many people will pass something called flower bracket del here. That's a wrong notation because it will input flower bracket del into your Excel sheet. Okay, so it can't understand the function there. So simply input an empty field over here. Input it. But understand one thing, after passing this empty value, at the end you have to save the workbook. Otherwise, like it can't save this empty value. It can't delete that particular column or that particular cell. Okay, so we have to save the changes with close or save Excel workbook. Now this is a uh, uh, simple scenario where we use sometimes in our projects to delete a particular cell. Question number 6. Question 6 is, how do we scan or verify a timer based pop-up which appears only for 2 to 3 seconds? Now this is a beautiful question. This is a beautiful question. You will definitely face this in your projects, and unless until you have seen this and practiced it, you would not know how to answer this. Okay, so how to scan or verify a timer based pop-up which appears only for 2 to 3 seconds. So when I click on some object, some pop-up comes. Yeah, but that only stays for only 2 to 3 seconds. The problem here would be, how do I scan that page? How do I scan the page? And how do I identify that pop-up? Because it will stay only for 2 3 seconds. The moment I go to module, right click on it and say, start the scan and select the application, the pop-up would be gone. I can't scan it. So how do we do this? There are different procedures for this. There are different procedures people will follow. I'll tell you one procedure and I'll explain you another one or two procedures also. Just observe this. So now these are the steps that we have to follow, but I'll show it with a different example. You see this example also, it's a continuation. Okay, the previous slide, this slide to that slide. So first of all, let us understand our requirement, understanding the demo web shop requirement. I open a book called health book. Okay, and there is an add to cart option. When I click on add to cart, generally we get this pop-up called the product has been added to your shopping cart. This pop-up will come, but problem is this will stay only for 2 to 3 seconds, and after 2 to 3 seconds this will be gone. You can't find this. So how do I scan this? How do I scan this? For verifying that I want to scan, I want to create a module. How do I scan it if it stays only for 2 to 3 seconds? Now here's the situation. So firstly, right click on the object add to cart, which triggers the pop-up, and inspect the object to identify the properties. Now which object creates, if I click on add to cart, only then this pop-up will appear. So this is my object. Okay, so we right click on this object and inspect it. We click on inspect. When I click on inspect, this HTML code, the developers coding will come down here, and the properties will be highlighted here. Now what do we do here? Now what do we do? go up and you say right click on the properties of the add to cart object. Now whatever properties that we have got here, right, we simply right click on that properties. As of now, there is no pop-up here. Have not clicked on it. Okay, this is before clicking on this. So you have identified add to cart object here. You right click on that, I mean you right click on this add to cart and you find the inspect, and when you inspect you'll get the properties. Now for these properties, you right click on it and you go to force state. You see there is an option called force state. Now right click on the properties of the add to cart object and select force state and enable the focus option. You see there is an option called focus here. If you go to force state, there is an option called focus. At first it will be not be enabled. It will not be enabled. Okay. So what you do is you click on this force enable. So this pop-up will be gone. So now it is ready for execution. It is ready for, to apply this focus. Okay. So now when we click on the add to cart object, now the setup is done. Now I come here and I click on this add to cart. When I click on this add to cart, this pop-up will appear here. And this pop-up will be in focus. It will not go away. It will be in focus. It will always be in the focus. It will stay there for how much ever time you are there in that page. It will stay there. So now what do you do? As the pop-up is already staying there, you go to your Tosca modules and you start scanning. See, when you click on the add to cart object, the triggering event pop-up will be on freeze. So now we can go to scan the web page. We can now scan the web page and identify the pop-up. You can simply go to the modules, scan this page. Now this pop-up will be shown and this pop-up properties will be shown. So you identify this pop-up, make it unique, and then come back and we refresh. So okay, we have identified the module. So how do we do it? We can simply take that module, go to the test case. Right after add to cart object, I put that module and I say verify if this pop-up is appearing or not. The test case will be successful. But how do I release this lock? Simply refresh this. It will be gone. Just we refresh the page to release the freeze. Now this is such a beautiful option. You can apply this to many applications, but understand one thing: there are different ways to handle this. This situation like pop-up. Not every time the procedure whatever I've explained here will work every time. Sometimes what happens is there are some timers available. So inside this HTML code, we can introduce a timer for 10 seconds or 15 seconds. So we're increasing the timer of this particular, so unless until the timer is complete, then this next option will never go away, will never fade away. So that is when you can go to your modules and you can scan it. That is one option. Or it's not about a time, a piece of code will be there where you can apply that code in, you can add that code into your browser, and when you execute, the browser will be on freeze. You can execute, you can scan the module and you can identify the object. There are different procedures for doing this. Programmatically also we can do it, but this is a simple method which can do the trick for you. Not every time, most of the times. Okay. So that's with the question number 6. So how do we scan or verify a timer based pop-up which appears only for 2 to 3 seconds? This is an answer. You explain all these scenarios, explain, take a requirement, take a question, take a scenario and explain, take an example and explain. So go to this next question, question number 7. So this is question number 7. How to identify the total rows of content in an Excel sheet and iterate the execution for each row. This is such a beautiful, beautiful question. This tells you your understanding of your requirement. This tells you your usage of the modules. It will tell you how better you can handle your framework. This one single question covers a lots of things for you. Okay, so having said that, so what the question is, how to identify the total rows of content in an Excel sheet. So if I have an Excel sheet with me, and if I have, sometimes I may have only 7 rows, sometimes I might have 10 rows, sometimes I may have 150 rows. So the number of rows might change. Example, the business scenario for this would be every time, every day the client will give you a list for whom we have our banking application has to create the credit card reports, and we have to send it to them like a statement, credit card statements. We have to send to the clients. This is the real-time scenario. So how do we do that? So first of all, we have created an automation suite, but how many iterations our automation test case should run? So for that, you need to note the total number of rows that are present in an Excel sheet, which has the content, right? So for doing this, there are different procedures again. You can identify using row count. You can identify using to see to put a loop and understand, repeat that loop till you see the empty value. When you see an empty value, that is when you understand that, okay, the previous line is the last line of data. So there are different solutions for this. But if you ask me, the best solution for this would be, the answer for this would be this. So after opening the Excel workbook and after defining the range, I use that range. I use this Excel, manipulate Excel range option. I use this range R1. I go to the data table and I say, in the row point of view, I'll say go to the last content row. I'll say go to the last content row. So the control will be on the last content row. If you have 7 rows, the control will be on the seventh row. If you have 20 rows, the control will be on the 20th row. If you have 120 rows, your control will be on the 120th row. So now the control is on the last content row. Now you are asking the tool, okay, on this row, get me the row number. So actually, when you steer this property, when you drop down, you can see only exist is equal to enabled inner text or tags. Only those values will be there. Those properties will be there. But you can type it. This is one more property here. We call it as a row number. So row number, R capital, N capital, row number, you say you get that property and store it into a new buffer called total rows underscore B. So it's not verify, it's a buffer. So you're asking the tool, go to the last content row, get the row number and store it inside a buffer B. That is total rows B. So now total rows B will have how many rows are there in this particular Excel sheet. As you have got this Excel total rows, now use that inside your iteration. So here I have used, you can use for iterations, you can use a while loop or do while loop. So I'm here using repetition here. So I create a folder here, and now inside this folder I put, I'm asking it to read the rows. My requirement is just to read the rows. Okay, so I iterate it, read for all the rows. So Excel read, go to this counter b value is equal to 1. So dollar of b of counter b. If you want to understand this logic better, go to our video that we have created on project scenarios on Tosca, the part 2 and part 3. There you will understand how to work with the Excel in a framework. So we use counter B as one here, so it implies first row. But repeat this process. You see this folder, we need to repeat for how many times? Total number of rows. So if you have got 7 rows, it need to be repeated for 7 times. If you have got 50 rows, it need to be repeated 50 times. I don't have to manually calculate it. I can use last content row, get the total rows here, and then go to this folder in the down screenshot. And in the right side properties, in the repetition, I use this buffer flower bracket B of total rows B. It'll be it'll be using whatever rows that you have got, that will be used as repetition count. That many times you will process this read, process, and write folder. Again, as I told you, there are different ways. Instead of this row number on the row level, I can go to the column. I can go to the data table level and I can get the row count. But that will be dependent upon your range that you have defined. If you have defined the range as Z100, here the row count will give you 100. That's not total number of rows, that's your range. So there are some difficulties in the other methods, but this works wonders. Okay, so that's with how to identify the total rows and use it as an iteration. Moving to the next question, question number 8. So this is the question number 8. I have a test case with 6 steps. I have a test case with 6 steps. How to execute first 3 steps in Chrome browser and next 3 steps in Edge browser? Very interesting question. I generally ask these questions in all these questions, whatever I've discussed now, definitely I will ask in most of my interviews according to the experience levels. So how do we execute in a single test case some steps? Example, it doesn't have to be same number here. Okay, if I have some 10 steps totally, how to execute 7 steps in one browser and another 3 steps in another browser? How do we do that? So totally some steps in one browser and some steps in another browser. How do we achieve that? So this is an interesting option, and the answer is very simple. It can be done very easily also. The answer would be here. So if we go to configuration. For every test case, you have a configuration. Definitely for the browser, we apply whether it is Chrome browser, Edge browser, or Firefox browser. Instead of giving the value directly for that test case, I will simply say browser value. I'm going to give it during my test case. I'm saying I'm not assigning any value here. I'm saying flower bracket B of browser B. So whatever is the value of browser B, in that browser, this will be executed. Now I go to my test case. Observe this. I go to my test case. Now this is my test case. You see, valid login in two browsers. So first of all, I am adding a TBox set buffer and I'm assigning browser B value with Chrome. So as I am assigning this with Chrome, this value will become Chrome. So browser is equal to Chrome. So now the next, when you say open URL, the test case will be open in the Chrome browser. Verify if the app is open or not and close the browser. First three steps will be executed in the Chrome browser. Next, again I'm using the tbox set buffer again. Browser B value this time now it is Edge. As it is Edge, the browser value will be set up with Edge. Now URL, verify if the app is open or not, and Chrome browser, these steps will be executed in the Edge browser. Such a beautiful, simple yet elegant option to handle multiple browsers in a single test case. It's not about only single test case. You can do the same procedure for multiple test cases also. In one test case, you can pass this value as Chrome, and in another test case, you can pass it as Edge or Firefox, whatever it is. That's with question number 8. Now moving to the question number 9. Question 9 is, how do we refresh a web application page in Tosca? How do we refresh? This is a simple question, but you have to be knowing the answer for this, because see, these are all the questions that tells you it's not only about whether you know the concept, and it's not only about whether you have used this concept or not, like we have seen in our previous videos. It is all about how many issues you have seen, how many problems you have seen, and how you have solved it. Have you solved it, or have you have a mind to solve it or not? That is what is the testing methodology here. That is what we interviewers want to test. So how do we refresh a web application page in Tosca? Let's see. I've got a couple of answers for this. Let's see the best one. So why do we need to refresh generally in projects? Like we need to refresh to a web page to load the calculated objects. So based upon a particular value, if some other values need to be loaded, so we have to refresh sometimes to load values. Or if any object did not load correctly, even then we have to apply this refresh page. Okay. So having said that, the first answer for this would be send a function key F5 under TBox send keys module. This is the best answer, I'll say. The function key F5, generally F5 implies it's a refresh, right? So how do we pass function key F5? We can pass it using TBox send keys module. So now here is an example. You see this caption is demo star. Demo star is my application, demo web shop application. Now on this application, I'm passing flower brackets F5. If you take the latest version, you don't have to put this double quotes before and after. But if you are taking a bit older versions, I mean 2023 something, those versions, you have to put double quotes before and after, because the old versions are built in such a way that the tbox and case can pass only data. But flower bracket F5 is not data, is a function. It can't handle function. So in order to handle function, you want to fool the tool by passing double quotes before and after. But in the latest versions, you don't have to put it. So even if you put also, it doesn't matter. So when you pass this test case, when you pass this test step, it'll refresh the page. But be mindful about the wait before and after this refresh. Sometimes after the refresh, it will take some time to load. So be mindful about that. Now, there are other ways also to do this. The one way is we can use execute JavaScript standard module. Okay, this is also inside your HTML under the TBox engines. Okay, under standard module engines under HTML, you can find this execute JavaScript. You can pass refresh using this execute standard script also. Now there is one more way, one more way. This is also one interesting method. I'm not sure now how many people are using, but under the when you scan a module, right? Generally, when you scan a module, you scan it using HTML object references, right? Like when you so how do we scan a module? In the module, we right click on it, we say scan, and a pop-up will appear which will list down all the applications that are present in your, in your laptop open. Now that is nothing but select a web page. You can select any web page or any application, whatever you want to scan, and generally we simply click on scan from here itself after the selecting work page. But instead of doing that, you right click on it. You right click on that application. Example, if you want to scan it in the Chrome browser, right click on that Chrome browser, you will get some options. What are those options? You will have HTML as one option, you have UIA as one option, you have non-UI as one option. You have some options inside that. Out of that, generally HTML will be selected because you're scanning HTML web application. But now change that option to UIA and click on scan. When you scan this, it will scan the entire browser, the front button, back button, refresh button, all the bookmarks, closing, maximizing, minimizing, and then and inside this, all the settings information, the title, everything, background point of view, everything will be identified from the browser, not only about the application. Application browser also will be identified. And inside that, you will find an option called reload. We can select that reload object and we can use it in our test cases. You can drag and drop this module. You can use that as X. It will refresh the page. Now, these are some methods for refreshing a web page in your Tosca. Now, moving to the final question, question number 10. Question 10 is, how do we group test cases in execution list? What are the different folder structures we follow for the execution list? Now, it looks very simple question, but it will tell you a lot about your architect skills. Okay, so till now, the questions are all about the technicalities. I mean, if you are good in test case creation, that is more than enough to understand whatever we have discussed till now. But this is an architect level. An architect not only looks for your test case creation, but also will look for test case execution. How do we execute it? How do we trigger it? How do we plan for a bigger roles? Are we considering sprints? What is our methodology? Everything need to be considered here. How do we group test cases? So how do we group test cases in execution list? So we have created 500 test cases. We have to group them, those 500 test cases. We can't simply drag all 500 and execute all 500 for everything. Not possible, because of the timelines, because of the challenges, because of the functionality. Not possible every time. So what are the different folder structures we follow in execution list? Now the answer for this would be, so once the test cases are created and executed successfully in Scratchbook, only then we drag and drop them to the execution list. This is very important point. Many people, what they do is like they create the test cases, but they will not do enough testing in the Scratchbook. No, execute the test case multiple times in the Scratchbook just to see if there are any technical failures in the test case, not functionality I'm talking about. I'm talking about technical failures. Have you created the test case correctly or not? So do it multiple times in the Scratchbook, and only then you drag and drop into the execution list. And I'll tell you one more thing. Before scheduling these test cases, execute many times in the execution list, at least 2 to 3 times in your execution list. Only then you can schedule these test cases. Your admin will generally ask this point. Have you executed your test case multiple times in your execution list? If so, share me the history of the report or history of the execution list. I want to verify. Only after they verify, they will allow you to schedule these test cases in any of the scheduling platforms like Jenkins or Azure or GitLab or Qtest. Okay, so these are all some points. Now we can group the test cases based upon two categories. One category is releases and another category is types of testing. Understand? If you are following a methodology of uh, s- you have sprints that are going on. Okay, you have a sprints methodology that is going on. So agile methodology that is going on, where you handle with lots of sprints. So you will have many releases and its sprints. So your developer will take at least 2 weeks to take new requirements, convert that requirements into sprints, and deploy that as per sprints. After example, every 2 weeks once on Friday, they will deliver the product to you. for testing. So you will get the releases in sprints. So what do? You will create release one sprint one, release one sprint two, release one sprint three, release one sprint four. Once the release is complete, then you go for next release. Release two sprint one, release two sprint two, release two sprint. So that is how you create the folders. Okay, because you want to create this regressions testing for every sprint. You want to execute all the test case according for every sprint. But then again, there are one more grouping structure, that is types of testing. So you have 500 test cases. All 500 test cases can be your functional testing. But out of that, some test cases will fall into regression, some test cases will fall into smoke testing, some test cases will fall into performance testing, some test cases will be considered as UAT test cases. So you don't want to execute all 500 test cases for regression, for smoke, for UAT, for sanity. We don't do that. So create a folder structure which separates what type of functionality you are using, functionality, functional or regression or smoke, whatever it is. Okay. Having said that, the folder structure depends on project plan. So functional testing follows release and sprint testing. So if you're doing functional automation, okay, then you go for releases and sprints. But if you have regression testing, follows functionality folders. Either it can be login, cart, register, and adding books to the cart, orders, order maintenance. All of these things come into your regression testing. So it's all releases inside testing, types of testing, and types of testing inside releases. You have to understand which takes precedence. But generally, the followed procedure would be for functional testing, we go for releases and sprints. And for regression testing, we go for folder structures here, login and cart. It all depends. There is no standard answer for this. It all depends upon your plan, your releases, your project deadlines, and your project scope and strategy. So it all depends upon that. Now, having said that, if you want to see how exactly it looks like this, it looks like this. You see inside execution list, I've got a project folder, demo web shop. Either you handle it in the release one, sprint two, sprint three, release two, sprint one, sprint two, sprint three, or you go for regression testing. You have login, register, and shopping cart and all those things. It's up to you. So this is one structure. As I told you, there is no defined structure. There is no standard structure. I mean, this is one better way to use it, but it depends upon your plan. Okay. So these are the different 10 questions that can help you a lot in both your interviews and also in your projects. This will help you handle the interviews. This will help you tell the interviewer, boss, I know how to use the concept. I have worked this concept in my projects. Not only worked, I've used that in my framework in multiple scenarios, and during the course of that, I have faced many problems and I have solved it. This will tell you. You have to prove those things. You don't have to tell directly like I have worked on multiple scenarios, I've solved problems. These examples, the answers will should tell that information directly to the interviewer. Okay. So that's with the 10 questions. And now one final point. Are you looking for Tosca training? You can send your inquiries to the below email and we'll reply back with the program, with the TOC, and the financials related to that, the support we provide, everything will be, you will get a call from us and we will discuss all those things with you. So happy learning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications so that you will never miss our next concept. Also, if you have any questions, please comment in the video or mail us at technologytrainingexperts@gmail.com. See you in the next video.